Tune in.
Tune in.
Tune in.
It's the power of the game.
It's the power of the game.
It's the Power of the Game podcast by Golf Saudi.
Hello and thanks for joining me on another episode of the Power of the Game podcast with myself, Robbie Greenfield. My guest on today's episode is Jonathan Smith. He's the Executive Director and founder of the Golf Environment Organisation, better known as GEO, the Foundation for Sustainable Golf. Jonathan, over the course of his illustrious career, has become one of the leaders in this field. He's led the environmental team for Scottish Golf. When founding GEO back in 2006, he's created a sustainability agenda which has led him to become one of the advisors for huge organisations like the European Tour, the Ladies European Tour, and massive global events like the Ryder and Solheim Cup and Olympic golf as well. And Jonathan has taken that expertise and he's brought it very much to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in partnership with Golf Saudi. They have a shared vision for how golf can set itself apart as a leader in sustainability and environmental issues. It's one of the hottest topics in the world today, not just in sport, but globally as well. And this is a fascinating insight from a true expert in his field. I started the conversation, as I've done with so many of the guests on this series, by asking Jonathan, who went to university incidentally at St Andrews and is Scottish, well, whether golf was in his blood.
It is a bit like that. So one of those Scottish kids that was handed a club at age 4, played with my father and grandfather. A grandmother occasionally turned out at a golf club, sort of working man's club south of Edinburgh, and just really loved it, enjoyed it. So have played not as much as I would have liked over the years, but played from an early age. A great, for me, actually, personally, a great sort of intergenerational thing. I really appreciate the time that it gave me to spend with my grandfather in particular. A lot of happy hours out on the golf course.
Yeah, it does bring people together. And of course, you went to university at St Andrews. How many times have you lost count of how many times you've played the old course? I'm
ashamed to say how few times I managed to play over the 4 years. I was playing quite a lot of rugby at that time, so that's part of the explanation. That was great. I managed to do some work with the R&A over those 4 years as a sort of student. So that was a sort of window into sort of golf's governance and administration and the Open Championship, which was really exciting. And I think that I was studying geography at the time, so I was had that sort of environmental sort of academic interest. But then when that sort of bounced up against, how exciting and what a great sport golf is, not just on the grassroots side of, people being able to pick up a club and have those experiences out on a course, but then around the things like the Open and the excitement and buzz of golf, it really sort of cemented an interest in the two things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, your background coming from Scotland, going to university at St Andrews, the old course is really a product of the land, isn't it? I mean, Links land is the land traditionally that linked the sea to the kind of arable farming land. It was that sort of strip in the middle. And I always think of Scottish links as literally just being there forever and not being something that is particularly man-made or, nature has somewhat crafted them and therefore they are such a seamless part of the environment. And yet you develop this environmental conscience, playing courses that are not like, very manicured American parkland courses or courses that you'd find in the Middle East that require a lot of water. Can you kind of explain where that interest originated from?
Well, actually there's a lot happening in sustainability. People often equate sustainability as being linked to things that endure, including the planet and including, a happy, healthy, prosperous society on the one planet we have. So sustainability and seeing things that endure are very closely linked. And also what's happening around sustainability at the minute is this sort of idea of looking backwards to look forwards as well, to seeing if there are some of the things that we are doing now which are less sustainable and creating some of these environmental and social challenges that society faces. So I think looking back to the old course and seeing how great golf could be delivered in a way that was relatively simple and, not necessarily heavy in technology, but working with the land and working with nature, there's a lot of really important lessons to take forward from that. But at the same time, as golf has developed in different ways, we don't think as an organization it's fair to say, well, that's not valid and that can't be further improved or developed. So, we've been looking at a lot of ways where any facility, from a 200-year-old course to a more recent one, or one that's under construction now, how can all of these things embrace sustainability? And there's certainly great lessons to be learned from some of those older courses and how they have worked with nature over the years. But now, you add into the equation things like new technology, new tools and innovations, ways of managing water, clean energy, raw materials that are recycled and reused, composts, compost teas. Those things on the sort of water and energy side particularly are new technologies, and a lot of time and money invested in those. So bringing those into golf now is also part of the solution. So certainly a lot we can learn from the origins of golf, and look to see how that can also help point to a more sustainable future.
Cynics would say that it is not really in our nature as human beings to be sensitive towards the environment. I mean, I watched the recent David Attenborough documentary with a degree of horror. I'm sure you might have seen it as well. And obviously there are some pressing issues that are going to dominate the agenda for decades to come. And we have got ourselves into a position. Yet, have you seen sentiments and perceptions change and that environmental sensitivity since you've been involved, Jonathan, for the best part of 20 years or so?
Dramatically. I mean, 20 years ago, the focus was on, environmental protection, golf having a negative image. So what was golf going to do about its image? Maybe more than what's golf going to do for society.
Why did golf have a negative image? Why did it have a negative image?
I think because, I think in some ways because there were some justifiable concerns about the way golf was developing, and whether golf was paying full attention to detail of environmental issues. I think that was partly justifiable concern over, how golf was developing and has been developing, and also lack of communication, lack of golf telling its story to say, look, actually, when you strip this back and look at how we're building courses or how we're operating our facilities, and what goes in terms of inputs and what comes out in terms of wider social and environmental value and benefits, that story wasn't being packaged up and told in the way that we're able to do it now. So it was a bit of a combination of, I think, to be honest, a little bit more impact than was necessary on the environment, and also a lack of communications to tell golf's story. And that culminated in people not having the true story and the full story, but also hearing and seeing things that justifiably, I think, caused them concern, to be honest.
You'd worked with Scottish Golf, and then I think it was 15 years ago, you founded GEO, the Foundation for Sustainable Golf. And if you cast your mind back to then, what was your original vision setting out, Jonathan? And can you talk about the journey thus far over the last decade and a half to get to where we are now in 2021?
I think our vision was, how could golf become the sport most recognized for its commitment and its action? So, the sport most active in sustainability was one sort of, piece of the vision and goal. And then I think the other one was, how can golf represent a bit more collectively and a bit sort of more as a community? How can it represent that credible commitment and that value that the sport generates, and the responsibility that it's showing? So part of it was about, golf walking the walk, helping golf walk the walk, and part of it was about helping golf talk the talk credibly. And so what we did was we looked at how other sectors and industries were doing that, from forestry to fisheries to farming to tourism. Who were the success stories in going from where they were with sustainable development to where they wanted to be. We looked at Unilever, we looked at BMW, we looked at corporations that were accelerating their sustainability internally, and then also taking that out into their communications. And we looked at the tools that they were using, and we sort of cherry picked some of the best things that we thought, and we built that into the sort of programs and services that GEO now provides to what has become a reasonably large community of golf associations, media partners, grassroots clubs, new golf developments, and also tournaments. So then we looked at the sector and thought, how can we take these into different custom-built tools into different parts of the industry?
Was there one particular company or organization that inspired you the most? Were there any that surprised you in the work that they'd done?
I think there have been a few who, over the last decade have been, either front runners in delivery and or also supporters of ours. I mean, the R&A have done a lot. They've constantly looked at the environment sustainability as something that golf needs to consider, and consider increasingly closely. It's a pillar of the R&A as an organization. They've also done a lot more recently with the Golf Course 2030 strategy, which is looking at the challenges that the environment is presenting to golf over the next 10 and years and beyond, and helping golf pay attention to these issues. So that has been hugely valuable, that sort of governing body leadership, I think, by the R&A. But we've been delighted by the sort of interest and enthusiasm from 20 to 30 national golf federations who are picking up sustainability as important for the growth and success of golf in their country, for its popularity, and for its efficiencies and its profitability. So Swiss Golf, Golf New Zealand, Sweden, Portugal, Italy, England, Scotland, those federations are now building sustainability into the future growth of and success of the game. That's great to see. And then on the professional side, the European Tour, we're now working with the Ladies European Tour on celebrating the green. We are seeing tours and tournaments actually picking this up apace, including both of the Saudi international events, men's and women's. We're now working on sustainability action plans for both of those events. I think, so it's the grassroots side, and it's also happening on the professional side. And I think maybe the third community that are worth mentioning is the International Societies of Golf Architects. So the European, American Institutes, the Australians. So these are the people that are designing and building new courses. There has been a major drive on education and awareness, and even almost like professional standards within those institutes, which is really commendable.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, one of the sort of catchwords that comes out time and time again is the use of native species of grass and plant to complement the environment when a golf course is built, as opposed to bringing in a whole load of kind of foreign plants and maybe ones that maybe they need more water consumption or they're not as suited. That has become something that you'll see at the top of every press release when a new golf course is announced. And has that come through your encouragement, or has it come off their own bat and their own kind of sort of moral compass?
I think a lot of it has come from the leadership of individual bodies within golf, which is actually what GEO is here to serve. I mean, we don't see it as being about us. We see ourselves as supporting golf and in trying to accelerate things and encourage and provide solutions. So I think, there was a lot of research going on in that space. It was being bought into by the architects. I think GEO has helped build that into programs and around our certification as sort of these being, some of the fundamentally important things. Our role is to try and help make sure that those things are carried out more consistently at much greater scale across the industry by working with partners such as the architects associations. So I think some of this was happening anyway. One thing maybe to mention is that, a change that has happened is that sustainability has gone way beyond agronomy. It's gone way beyond wildlife. It's gone beyond water. It's gone beyond energy. It's become, I think, and this is what GEO has been trying to do, is help people see it as actually like a multidisciplinary thing that is a really good lens for anybody in golf to look through, because it will create a better product, a more efficient one, more profitably. You'll be more popular. You'll attract more sponsorships. The community will respond differently to you. There are so many business benefits that happen when you take that lens of sustainability. And grass species is one, more biodiversity is another, recycled water sources and efficiency is one, renewable energy and net zero is another. Community engagement is another softer social part of sustainability and sort of social responsibility. What we've been trying to do is give people the tools to bring all of that together into, a deliverable model in their business and a communicatable set of outputs. And again, that's where we copied big corporations and other sectors. What was sustainability to that sector? How do you get people mobilized and excited within that sector? And how do you start communicating their outputs and sharing them so you get this multiplier? That's really what we've been working on with that sustainable golf community over the last decade.
And you've developed the sustainability agenda. How did that come together all at once? Have you added to that? Has that evolved over time? And if you have, for example, someone new who's come to you to say, listen, we want to clean up our act. We want to do better when it comes to sustainability. Is it about making drastic changes, or how do you kind of lay out a roadmap for them?
Yeah. So after we have said sustainability, what we typically say is, look, it's a practical set of issues that you can look at. So that agenda that you mentioned there, we put that together with a lot of collaborative input from within golf, and also bodies like WWF International, Wetlands International, the United Nations Environment Programme, the IOC, International Olympic Committee. So when we came up with nature, climate, resources, and community, like 4 action areas that anybody in golf can start to work to, that is sustainable development wrapped up in that agenda. And that's at the heart of the Saudi strategy as well, those 4 themes. And I think what we're seeing now is that, whether you're building a course or managing a facility or running a tournament, thinking about how you're going to integrate those things into the delivery and the communications, it's starting to work. We're seeing that become a language that golf is using. We're fostering nature, we're conserving resources, we're taking climate action, we're strengthening our community. Those have all the component parts of sustainable development, but just boiled down into something that's really material and relevant and actually quite simple and practical for anybody in golf.
Yeah, when it comes to Saudi Arabia and specifically, it has no history in golf, but therefore it has no baggage, or it has no bad habits that it's collected over the course of decades of perhaps mismanagement or doing things without the best knowledge and the best practices. So it's interesting because it's a golfing project that is a blank canvas when it comes to the courses that are being designed, when it comes to the best practices of doing things. So really, it's a great template for what GEO, kind of the ethos of GEO and the willingness of Saudi to put sustainability right at the top of their order of priorities. I mean, whenever I speak to people like Ed Edwards and anyone involved in the project, it's always a huge concern. It's always a huge priority.
It's very rare to work with a national federation, national governing body that is starting so early on in the process of developing golf, that has also opened up, a blank canvas discussion about sustainability and about how to address some of these issues as the industry develops. So when we were asked to put that sort of national sustainability strategy together for golf in Saudi Arabia, that was one of the first things we looked at is, can we ask awkward questions? How comprehensive is your thinking? How strongly do you want to frame that commitment? What is the framework of sort of tools and guidance and tracking indicators and all of those things that are within the strategy? And Golf Saudi, to their credit, said, give us it all. We want to know what's in here, and we want to wrap it up into the future development of golf in the kingdom. And that, whilst we're working with many other federations, maybe in more immature markets, this was quite a unique opportunity to do it from the start. And I think, Golf Saudi have been really open to what we've said. It has been virtually entirely framed within that national strategy, which is now being rolled out with some of the existing developments. It also goes into the types of facilities and the diversity of facilities and what will be developed. The technical detail, as you touched on there, Robbie, about how they're developed, in terms of water and turf grasses and energy and so on. So all of that is wrapped up. And I think what has also been interesting with Gulf Saudi is this idea that this is not just for the Gulf sector. This is, Gulf doing something that's in the national interest. So tying that to the Saudi 2030 vision, tying it to, what are Gulf supply chains? What social enterprises and environmental enterprises can Gulf help generate as Gulf develops that will create businesses and multipliers outside Gulf? There's just a lot of sort of multiplier and legacy elements to what they're trying to do as well, which is fantastic to build in, because that is part of the power of Gulf. It's not just embracing sustainability to benefit Gulf, but if Gulf does that, how does that Gulf then give back even more environmentally and socially?
When you create a blueprint for a national federation like that, obviously there are a lot of different stakeholders that they're going to be building, I think, something in the region of 13 new golf course development projects, each of which will have its own different set of parameters and different kind of remit, different aspirations with different stakeholders, different developers as well. How do you create consistency in what you do from an environmental standpoint when you're dealing with so many different organizations and individuals?
Yeah, that is challenging, sort of stakeholder engagement. What we've done so far is work sort of top down and bottom up, basically. So the national strategy that's been put together has been put together with other partners internationally, but also domestically, and expertise in a range of different environmental disciplines within Saudi Arabia. And then that provides the sort of reference basically for the way that some of the existing projects are picking up. So then you sort of cross compare what's in the national strategy with what's already embodied in the projects and their development teams. And we're in the process of doing that. And actually a lot of that highlights a lot of impressive work on the current developments within Saudi Arabia, but also maybe some new things or some things that Gulf Saudi are saying are important that are then given even more attention in those projects. So that so far, that has, and given that it's not at the moment a huge stakeholder group, it's a relatively focused group, that's been manageable. And I think
right.
There's a good harmony between the national strategy and the current projects. But I think there's also a little bit of, letting the projects know that this is important at a national level and not solely at a project level, but quite a good harmony actually between those things. Certainly on some of the big issues like water and energy and carbon emissions and ecosystem restoration and anti-desertification work. So there's quite a good match up between the things that the current projects want to do and the things that Gulf Saudi are recognizing as important to do.
Yeah, I mean, from a very basic level, and I don't have a nuanced understanding of it, but I've lived in the Middle East a long time. I'm aware that water consumption and obviously the correct selection of grass species that will do best with that water consumption is very important when it comes to environmental concerns. Saudi Arabia is obviously a very arid, very hot climate as well, which would seem to me to be something that would increase the need for these concerns and actually make those more difficult and more challenging to execute.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no getting away from that in super arid environments, building courses needs absolute attention to detail. And actually, from a carrying capacity point of view, particularly you have to start with, what's going to be the demand and what's the availability. Looking at watersheds and what's happening in terms of precipitation and aquifer storage and recharge and, the demand. And then, taking that sort of more macro approach on, development and carrying capacity, and then taking that down into the sort of next phase, which is avoiding, potable water for any purpose other than human consumption. So then you're into, treated sources, effluent water. That has a direct link with energy and how you can do all of that and process that and power it in, a low carbon or ideally net positive way. So you're actually generating more energy than it's taking to process the water. And then you're down into the efficiencies. And that's where things like minimizing turf area, having the right grasses, irrigation practices, sprinkler heads, nozzles. I can't go into all, but it is from macro to micro an issue that requires absolute attention to detail. And I think that is it's an issue now. It's been an issue in the strategy development. It's an issue now in the first phase of Golf's development in Saudi. And I think it will be an issue in terms of future phases of development in Saudi. And it might even pose questions about, matching up the audience and market for a golf facility with the types of grasses and the playing performance requirements that are needed for people to come and enjoy that facility. From 6-star to 6-hole, there's quite a breadth there. And we don't need to necessarily have the same playing quality and the same water requirements across that breadth of facilities. That is something that we're discussing.
In a place like Saudi Arabia, can you kind of paint us a picture as to what a golf course that is a positive contributor to the environment looks like versus a golf course that has a negative impact?
So first of all, in terms of landscape and ecosystem, there is an artificiality to what golf brings in a desert landscape. So minimizing that artificial impact is absolutely essential. And looking at ways that golf can have a net biodiversity, net ecosystem gain. So that could be wetlands. There's a lot of opportunity for biodiverse, rich oases, particularly on a migratory bird route, which Saudi is. So I think the landscape and ecosystems view of, yes, we're creating an artificial environment here, but the overall impact is something that is much more typical of the area, either in terms of desert landscape or wetland landscape or other forms of ecosystem. And we've got some good ecologists, good Saudi ecologists working on that. And then I think in terms of, the nexus between water and energy, it's all about, minimization and renewables and recycled, and how you bring that together so that on the energy front, actually, there are opportunities for golf facilities to be net exporters of energy back to the grid, renewably powered. And a lot of those investments are making a lot of commercial and financial sense in wind and solar and micro renewables. So how can the facility function on clean energy in effectively a carbon neutral or net positive way, whilst using that energy to power the most effective water solutions on site? So that technology exists. How is that going to be packed into the facilities is the question. And then there's actually, on the back of that, there's quite a lot of behavioral stuff that the staff, greenkeeper, superintendents, club managers, food and beverage, catering, that they can look at amongst the way they operate and the things that they consume and buy and how they go on to reuse or recycle those, like the zero waste facility is what I'm trying to describe. That's a whole area of materials that facilities can look at. So there's a lot of opportunity to really, really minimize, and really reduce and use those green technologies so you actually have some net positives, and at the same time use that change of landscape and land use to have net positives on the biodiversity and ecosystem side as well.
And given the ambitions that Saudi Arabia has already outlined, given the fact that we're at the beginning of this journey that they're going to be undertaking over the course of the next decade, does that make them, in your eyes, one of the most sort of fascinating case studies within golf to see how they go about executing all these ambitions and these very lofty targets that they've set themselves?
I think it's a very interesting country and partner to work with, because as we've highlighted here, the challenges are, I guess, tougher in some ways climatically. The challenges are more difficult than, say, Northwestern Europe. And yet they're at the start of a process where a lot of, the very latest thinking, best practices and technology and innovation can be built in to, make it better from the start. So there's, they're going into this with an awareness of sustainability and an awareness of these environmental issues and a determination to do something about it, which hasn't happened necessarily in other countries at the start of the development of golf. So I think they're quite a fascinating and modern case study in building golf, in the most sustainable way possible.
How optimistic are you, Jonathan, for the next few years? Obviously, Saudi Arabia is going to be very interesting to follow their progress, but for golf in general, you said that great strides have been made since you got into the industry and since you took an interest in it. Are you optimistic for the future? Are you hopeful that things are going to look a lot better in the next 10 years?
I think the levels of awareness and the levels of sort of almost like collective commitment that have been developed, so individual and collective commitment have been developed over the last decade or so, is a really positive step. It creates a bit of a platform that is a good platform to accelerate from. So I think that's good. The signs that are coming out of the industry and the willingness to all push ourselves a bit further is great. I think my concern lies with the speed at which that is going to happen and the scaling of it, because, as the United Nations have just, recently announced, we're in the decade of action for, the time that we as society have to address some of those big issues like biodiversity and ecosystem loss, like climate change, like pollution of air, water, and oceans. I mean, those are big issues that we need to do something about, and we've got, a time and a chance still to do something about it, but it is urgent. So those are some of the questions that we are asking ourselves, and also in discussion with partners in golf. How quickly can we move this forward? Because it's really important to society that quite a large and high-profile sport like golf does this. Golf can make a difference. But as I mentioned with the RNA's work, there's also that recognition that this is about how golf succeeds and how successful golf is in the future. So it is also, there's an urgency for golf to embrace sustainability for its own success as well. So yeah, that would be, I guess, the sort of view is that a lot of the understanding, a lot of the tools are in place, and some of that platform and quite a decent community is already active. But how can we sort of take this to the next level over the next 10 years is one of the uncertainties.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's definitely going to be interesting to follow. You continue to do such great work, Jonathan. And obviously it's fantastic that you're so involved in the Golf Saudi project. And I, for one, am looking forward to seeing how those develop and how those courses come through and they become leaders in sustainability. So I think it's a fascinating project, and we'd like to thank you very much for spending half an hour of your time to chat to us about these issues on the Power of the Game podcast.
Super. Delighted to have skimmed the surface of sustainable golf with you.
Oh, no, well, it could be an all-day seminar, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And more.
But yeah, I'm sure we'll make this a regular thing. So I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again in the future about about the progress that's been made and other issues that are surfacing as well.
Well, and if there's some different opinions and perspectives from different countries and inside golf and outside golf that we can help line up, then also happy to do that. Yeah,
that would be great. That'd be great. Yeah. But I'll let you go, Jonathan, and thanks so much for spending the time. It's always great chatting to you.
Yeah, you too. Nice to see you.
A big thank you to Jonathan Smith and GEO for joining us on this podcast. It's fascinating, and it's a very important issue that is going to preoccupy humanity at large, not just in the world of sport, but society in general over the coming decades as well. Jonathan's doing some fantastic work, and I think it's very exciting that GEO are collaborating so closely with Golf Saudi on their vision for how golf will look like in the kingdom in the years to come. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast to ensure that you don't miss a future episode, we'd love you to do so. If you would like to follow Golf Saudi's progress, you can head to their website, golfsaudi.com. They're on social media as well, at golf_Saudi on Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow there for updates. There are so many updates and so many pieces of news coming out of the kingdom that it's well worth you doing that. And please do join us on a future episode of the Power of the Game podcast. That's all for now. I'll catch you next time.